everybody. As you know, I've been going through a lot of changes this year, and part of that has been through reading. So my husband and I recently moved to Florida from South Carolina, and when we moved here, a lot of things kind of got really bad for me, and it was good. It was very good in the sense that it finally made me face a lot of the issues that I was having in my marriage, and then a lot of the things that I was believing about myself and my sickness and my dreams and a lot of the deep-seated issues that I have from past traumas and from being sick for so many years. And it was not easy. It's still not easy, but I have changed and grown so much over the past year that I really want to share with you all some books that I recommend for people to read that have just had an enormous impact on my life. The very first book I want to recommend that you read is The New Codependency by Melody Beattie. It came into my hands at the exact right time when God knew that I needed it the most. So, as I said, when we moved here, emotionally, I was broken. I was angry with my husband because of some things that had happened. I was angry with life because of all the physical pain, all the disappointments, all the letdowns, all the hurt. And I really needed help. And I went to Barnes & Noble specifically looking for a book on marriage and ended up not finding anything that appealed to me or felt right. And I went to the self-help section and saw the book called The New Codependency and was hesitant on getting it, but I just felt like it was time or the right thing for me to have because I had heard of Melody Beattie and I had put off reading her books previously because I never wanted to admit to myself that I was codependent. I never wanted to admit how much a role control and victimization and guilt played in my life. Not only did this book teach me to live in the moment and let things go, but I also learned that it's not everybody else's fault. I learned that me trying to control things and make things better for other people ultimately is me taking away their choices, letting go and letting people live their lives while I focus on mine changed my marriage. It changed how I react to my husband when he gets angry. I don't have to try to fix things and make things right for him anymore. I don't have to take on everybody else's emotions and try to make things okay for them anymore. It is so liberating to live this way, free from the control of myself and others, and resting in Christ and resting in the knowledge of who I am and relaxing and just embracing life has just changed everything for me. So this was the first book that I wanted to recommend to you because it just transformed my life. Every morning, after I make the bed, I get up and I get this book. It's called The Language of Letting Go. I talked about this before in a video with Lauren, but I read this every morning. At least I try to read it every morning, let's be honest. But I try to make this part of my routine because I have a lot of things that I have to let go of. People's opinions, thoughts about me, how I look, how I'm perceived, shame and guilt and control, all these different things that I've had to learn to give up or let go of this year, all these perceptions of myself. And it is just a daily reminder of different things that I need to surrender to God. Today's was about shame and how shame affects our lives so much. And I never realized how much shame affected me for a long, long time. How the shame of what people have said to me in the past, the shame of how I may be perceived, and the shame of being so big, the shame of not having a perfect marriage, of being sick, of feeling like an inconvenience to other people. So this is just a really good book if you want to learn to let go of all of the stupid things. I listen to audiobooks all the time when I'm cooking, cleaning, driving, whatever. I love listening to books. Most of the books I'm going to tell you about are actually audiobooks that I've listened to versus read, because I find that it really helps me to stay motivated when I'm exercising or trying to get stuff done. The third book I'm going to recommend is called Authentically Uniquely You by Joyce Meyer. I have struggled with feeling good about myself most of my life because of things that people have said to me and because of lies that I told myself. Authentically Uniquely You just really helped me start embracing myself and seeing myself in a positive light. One of the things she talks about is looking at yourself in the mirror and telling yourself that you love you, telling yourself that you're beautiful. And I know this is a common practice to help you gain self-esteem, but for me, it was just a new awakening. And there's so many insights and so many wonderful things in this book that I really encourage anybody who has low self-esteem and a poor self-image to read it. The next book I recommend reading is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This book may seem kind of out of the blue, but because I have had such self-esteem issues and I am really sick all the time, it's made having friends really difficult. And it's also made trying to venture into the business world, sales world, whatever it is, extremely difficult for me. And the thing I loved about this book is he taught you how to navigate that world with kindness and grace. A lot of times books teach you just to be a killer in the workforce. His book teaches you how to persuade people with kindness, and I really appreciated that. It also started to open my eyes to the fact that a lot of my issues with people stem from fear. Whenever somebody would come up to speak with me, one of my first thoughts would be, go away, I don't want to talk with you. And then I would wonder why I didn't have any friends. Some of it is because I'm an introvert, but a lot of it is just plain fear, which leads me into my very next book. Do It Afraid by Joyce Meyer. It is amazing to me the amount of decisions I've made out of fear. How many conversations I've missed, how many issues I've had because I was afraid. Afraid to face people, afraid to face myself, afraid to speak up, afraid to go for the job I wanted, afraid of what people might think, afraid of what might happen, possibly, sometime down the road. All these things, all these fears plaguing me. One of the greatest things she says in her book is, fear has no place in your life. Fear has no place in your life has become something that I repeat to myself over and over and over again. Every time I'm afraid to look somebody in the eye for fear of what they might say, every time I'm even afraid to face a consequence for a bad decision I made, I think I have no reason to be afraid. It is okay to face consequences. It's okay to look people in the eye and tell them what you really think and feel. It's okay if they don't like you. It's okay if they hate you. It's okay to love yourself, to be free, to be you. It's okay. This past year, I actually did a 5K, a mud run actually, because I was listening to this book at the time. I'd always wanted to do something like that, but there was a voice in the back of my head that said, you can't do it. You're too fat. You're too out of shape. You're too whatever. You're going to have a flare. You're going to get sick. It's going to be awful. I did it. I ran a 5K, jogged and walked mostly, and did an obstacle course. I used to be so afraid of heights, and I still struggle with that fear, but the entire time I was climbing a rope and going down the side of a huge obstacle, I kept repeating, fear has no place in my life. Fear has no place in my life. Fear has no place in my life. And I was so exhilarated and proud of myself when I climbed down, because I knew that not only had I faced a fear and conquered it, I had started a new life that day. I knew that everything had changed for me. Yes, I still have fears, but I had faced and conquered a huge one. Not only running the race, but climbing something high, coming down the other side without fear. If you are afraid, if you struggle with anxiety, OCD, and fear, please read or listen to Do It Afraid. It really changed my life. I highly, highly recommend it. I mentioned in the beginning that I have had a lot of marital issues. When my husband and I first moved here, we faced one of our biggest crises. He had switched jobs to make him happier, and I wanted him to be happy, so I fully embraced and supported him moving down to Florida. He had recently stopped drinking, and even though it was one of the best things that could have happened to him, it was one of the best things that could have happened to our marriage, those first 6 months were very difficult. They were very difficult on him because he was detoxing and giving up something that had been a crutch to him, that had helped him ignore a lot of pain that he needed to deal with. But it also caused him to take out a lot of his issues on me. As I said, I struggle with codependency, and I really tried to make things better for him, and I tried to ignore how bad things really were in our marriage. We have been married for nearly 6 years, and it has been a very, very difficult marriage. I won't go into details because I love my husband, and I would never want anybody to perceive him as anything other than a loving, wonderful husband. But it was hard. When I went to the bookstore that day to buy a book, I was actually looking for a book on emotional abuse, and a Christian book on emotional abuse. And I really want you to know that my husband has never hit me, and I love him dearly, and we have worked so hard on our marriage this past year. But I will say that the biggest thing for our marriage has been me learning to stop trying to control, me learning to focus on myself and not focus on him, to stop worrying about what's wrong with him and to start focusing on what's wrong with me. In listening to Boundaries in Marriage, I learned a lot of great techniques on how to have a better marriage with Matt, on how to love him better, how to communicate with him better, how to set great boundaries. And it really, really has transformed our marriage. Between learning not to live a codependent life, learning not to be so afraid, and listening to the Boundaries book, our marriage has really changed so much. So if you're struggling in your marriage, please go out and get Boundaries in Marriage by Henry St. Cloud. It is amazing. The following contains adult content. Viewer discretion advised. That means you, Mom and Dad. The Great Sex Rescue by Sheila Ray Gregory. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong, Sheila. The Great Sex Rescue is the best sex book. It doesn't contain pictures or how to do this or that position. It has amazing marital, premarital sex knowledge. I wish with every fiber of my being that everybody who is going to have sex, whether married or not, would have this book in their hands. It was a revelation for me. All these things that I believed and messed up the first 5 years of my marriage. Part of the reason we had so many problems was sex. Finances and sex are two of the biggest issues you have in marriage. Ask anybody. Before you jump to the conclusion that Matt was doing something wrong, please let me correct you and tell you that I was erroneous in a lot of my thinking. I love my parents, but unfortunately, they believed a lot of things that aren't true, and they taught me those things, and I am not in any way, shape, or form blaming them because they can't teach you anything that they don't know. I'm just grateful that I know it now. A lot of my confidence issues began when I was a little girl because I got my period when I was 10 years old, which caused me to have a womanly figure when I was much younger than people thought I was. When I was 16, I remember somebody asking me, how long have you been married and how many kids you have? And in some ways it was flattering, in other ways it was insulting because I was still a little girl in a woman's body. And I was raised to believe that it was my fault if a man looked at me. I was a child with big boobs, big hips, a round bottom, and I was beautiful. I wasn't made to feel beautiful, not by my mother. Mommy, if you chose to listen farther, please understand that I'm not saying that you and Dad made me feel ugly. You always told me that I was beautiful. I'm talking about those around me. And I was told to dress extremely modestly because, like I said, if a man looked at me, it was my fault. Well, I looked like a grown woman, so men looked at me, and I always felt gross and creepy and dirty, and it wasn't my fault. And I really want to stress that it's not okay to look at people like sexual objects. That was one of the biggest things I got out of this book, was that if you stop looking at people like objects and start seeing them as people, whether male or female, because women do it too. Oh, look at those muscles. He looks great. We need to stop that. We need to change the way that we see each other. And instead of seeing each other as too many clothes or not enough clothes, how about we just see each other as people? It doesn't matter if you're completely naked or covered from head to toe. If a man or a woman has a darkened heart, they will sexualize you. It's not your fault. The second biggest impact the Great Sex Rescue had on me was the obligation to have sex in marriage. And I'm not going to go into great detail into this, but I will tell you that there is a lie floating around out there that both the man and the woman are obligated to be with each other when they are most certainly not. And please, if you believe that, please pick this book up. She goes into so much detail on how detrimental that is to not only your sex life, but also to your mental health. If you love the person you're with, please get this book. There are so many good things in it, so many impactful, powerful things. But these were just 2 issues that hit home with me so deeply, and I felt compelled to share them with you. I ended with this because I wanted people to listen to all the other books that were so powerful to me this year without being embarrassed. If you wanted to stop at the sex book, I understand. That might be a little racy for some people. I just really felt like I shouldn't leave it out because it really changed the way I see sex, and it really changed the way I see myself, and it really changed the way I see other people. And I hope that if you're struggling in this area, that you'll go pick up a copy because it is just well researched and written with so much love. Here are a few other titles that I'm currently reading, but I didn't feel like I had time to add into this because I've already gone on for an extremely long time, and I really want this to be powerful.